Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This is the 132nd video in our Master Series and the 6th video in our Mastering phase. So that now that we have a master file, basically what we want to do is we want to use that master file to do mastering for formatting, because normally that master file is not going to be distributed anywhere except for maybe audio files. The sample rate and the bit depth is as high as you can possibly make it to retain as much quality as possible for when you format down. When you reduce sample rate and bit depth, that it's going to have a better chance of being a better product if you started out with a high as sample rate and bit depth as possible. And also that when you format into things like MP3s and things like that, that it's going to do a whole bunch of things to your audio, that you'll have a much better chance of coming out sound with something that sounds good, with something that has as high a bit depth and sample rate as possible as the master file to work from. So with that in mind, that basically we're ready to start doing some mastering. We did mastering in the last video, but most of the time that's a pretty simple concept. The actual mastering comes down to that most people don't listen to those files. They listen to CDs, they listen to MP3s and things like that. So the real work that comes into that, don't get me wrong, what you did in the last video is mastering. That basically is one of the biggest secrets of dark art of getting a really good master file to work from with as high a bit rate and sample rate as possible to work from, and going through all the steps we've talked about so far to have that file should be radio ready. Now, that is one step that now that you understand. The next thing is when we go into mastering to make some other formats or reduced bit rate and sample rates. This is a pretty simple thing. The first thing, until you really do some study and really understand dither and how you can augment it to do a better job than the algorithm in your mastering suite, or let's say you have something like Ozone or something like that that has a dithering algorithm in it. Remember, don't dither twice. First of all, never dither twice ever. Don't do any processing ever after you dither, period. And make sure that whenever if you're using the dither in your mastering suite, make sure that it's on. And if you're using the dither from some type of plugin, make sure the dithering algorithm in your mastering suite is turned off so it doesn't double the dither and cause you a big old mess to deal with. Keep that in mind. The next thing is, it's probably a really good idea until you've done some experimenting with it, mixing down, seeing how different dithers sound with your production, is to really trust the dither algorithm. Most mastering suites will have a dithering algorithm that functions fairly well. As you become a really good master engineer and you study about dither and you get some really good understandings about dither, then you can augment it to make it better. But it is difficult because nobody is going to tell you what their codec and container does, and so it's a hit and miss kind of thing. It's a guesstimate thing, and it's an experimentation thing that you may hit on it and you may not, and you can spend hours and hours and hours guessing whatever the heck that thing is doing to the piece of audio, and so it can cause you a lot of frustration. It did me when I was studying dither. So trust the algorithm to do a good job. Next thing is that we want to choose a format. Let's say that the first time we're going to choose an MP3. So we're going to choose a format. Now, at first, we're just going to choose a format, make sure it's under clipping, and render down. So when you get done with this, if I don't say so, when you go to create the master MP3 that's going to be for distribution, whatever format you're formatting to, check whatever streaming site it's going to, wherever it's going, for whatever, specifications need to happen so that it can fly where it's going. Does that make sense? Which means that sometimes that, you have to reduce the volume a little bit. You might have to do some things like that so that it can get played or streamed at some certain place, or in some different country that they've got some specifications set to where the audio has to be processed in a certain way. You're going to have to get into that because there's a lot of different things there, but most of the time it's pretty simple. Don't worry about it. You don't want it to clip. So basically for the most part that you want to check and see once you've mastered it, like you're going to master an MP3, that, you know, what does the level need to be set at so that it doesn't clip where it's going to stream or something like that, and really check that. Check those sites, check Apple Play, check iTunes, CD, wherever it's going. Does that make sense for streaming a lot of times? So just check that, but we'll get into that later. But so for the most part, we're ready to go. So when we get in there, there's a basic simple process that we go through. First, we render the mix down from the master file. We render an MP3 down. Say we're starting with MP3. We render the MP3 down from that master file without doing anything to it, okay? And we're not going to do nothing to it. We just want to master it the way it is. Now, once we've mastered it, we're going to have it in our comparison session to compare against the master file. Then what we're going to do is do any work on it in that comparison session that we have set up to make it sound as close as we can to that master wave file. Once we figure that out or get as close as possible, we're going to go back into the Project Mastering Suite and mimic that work we did in the comparison session in the Mastering Suite, and then re-render it to a master MP3. Then we're going to take it back into that comparison suite, check it again. So that process, there's a 3-step process there that you go over and over and over and repeat until you come out with a product that you're happy with. So basically, we've got it set up here. We're doing nothing to it. We're going to format it down to this MP3 with the bit rate that we want, with the sample rate, with the bit rate constant or variable, whatever that, you know, that people are asking for. And then we're going to render that. So once we're done with that, we're going to go back into this comparison suite, and we've got that master MP3 done. And we've got that master wave file. So what we're going to do is compare them. So we don't have no reference tracks or a mix down or nothing like that in here. And what we're going to do now on my iZotope stuff, that I do have a way that I can actually put my iZotope thing on there, put the MP3 in there, and actually switch back and forth of them in the reference file, listening to the master and the MP3. That can be helpful sometimes, but most of the time I've got this master wave file ran into an analysis bus that has a bunch of analysis tools on it for analyzing the audio, and I have the master MP3 sent directly to the main out. That way that I can go in here and I've got, let's say I want to use the scope, and I'm going to go in here with the scope, and I've got it ran direct into that. The master wave files run direct, and this MP3 file is sidechained into it. That way that not only am I listening for problems, is I am also going to visualize this. So now I have this MP3 that's in purple going against this in blue. So basically, if you can see what's happening here, that you can see differences immediately. You know, I mean, there are huge differences of what's happening here. So you can really visualize what's happening. Now, you can do this with all your visualization tools, whether it's the spectrum meter, all of these different tools you can do the same thing with to visualize what is happening, what's getting lost, what's different, besides just listening to it. Your biggest thing are going to be your ears. The more you become a better audio engineer and you understand what's happening in formatting, which I do suggest you study, then you have a better idea what the heck this means. Why does it look different? It's truncating information, it's doing reinterpolations, it's cutting information out, it's masking and removing information, all kinds of stuff to make sure that that file is a little teeny file instead of this huge, master wave file that you have that ain't going to be going on no MP3, bro. I mean, there's no way you can get that much information and produce the MP3, so they've got to cut down the information so that it's a smaller file. It's pretty simple. So basically, that you're going to compare it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in there and you're going to listen to each section separately and listen for differences and make notes. the markers up there, right in here, I'm hearing a problem, you know, you might put a marker there or something like that, you know, all the way across looking for issues and visualizing it with your, you know, my equalizer will do this, a side chain. It's really cool because I can really see things that are happening. You can raise and lower the decibel level, you know, of either one of them to try to bring them up close as possible to each other to see the differences are much better. And, you know, really analyze what's going on. Next, once you've really done some analysis on it, now you can go back. You want to go back and forth analyzing and listening. Listen to your headphones, listen to your monitors, visualizing it, what's going on, what differences you're seeing in the different sections and things like that. And then what you want to do is, now this is a problem because sometimes that different sections have different needs. But when you're doing this, a lot of times that's not true, but sometimes it can be. So you've got this comparison session that you can go through, like we were talking in the last video, and get up different sections to do automation of different things to try to get it set up. But for the most part, you're going to go through there and go through all that processing we did when we did our master wave file, changing it to try to make it sound as close to that master wave as possible. So it's a guessing game. You basically got to listen and you got to go, okay, it needs more low end, or it's got the high end cut out. I need to adjust this. It's done something on my mid side. The reverberation is too much now. It's too less. You need to go through there and figure out what you need to do in the processing to kind of reprocess it here to make it sound as good as that master wave file. Now, that's a work in progress. The better you get and the better you do at experimenting with this, the better you will become at doing that. Now, once you have that and you've reprocessed it with a bunch of processors here on the inserts and got a pretty good idea, then you go back in your processing mastering suite and you do all that processing to this master wave file that you have in here, and then reformat it back in that MP3, take it back into here and this here in this comparison file and recomparison. Do that over and over again until you have a happy mix. So basically it's that simple of a process. So there's no really way to teach you how to do that you're going to run into certain things. It'll be real obviously from listening to it intently and visualizing it. With those two things that you have, to visualize it and to listen, the better you get at it, looking, visualizing it, you go, I'm hearing things, but I don't know what that is. And you get out your analysis tools and go, oh, the high end's really cut out. The bass end looks different. The mid-range looks different. Something, you know, and can start trying to fine-tune that. A lot of times that, for the most part, that you might have some issues, you know, in all those areas, but you're not really sure. So it can become an experimentation thing that you really, okay, I'm going to readjust my EQ like I did when I was processing my master wave file, and I'm going to go through all that, trying to make this MP3 that I've rendered down sound as good as this master wave file, and then going back into that project page and then putting it in there and doing that work to this master wave file, which seems ridiculous because you're like going, well, I'm doing all this other work to this master wave file, you know, and it's like, well, now it doesn't sound as good. Well, guess what? Make sure you keep it under clipping, but make sure you got a limiter on there to keep it under clipping. And when you render it, what happens is, well, you've been readjusted your master wave file that's in this project page or in this mastering suite, but when it goes through the mastering process and formats it, that then it's changed it to take into consideration of what was being cut out and truncated and interpolations and things like that during the formatting process, and bingo, yeah, dude. Then you go back in here and you should be able to hear an improvement, redrag in the new MP3 that you just reformatted, and you should be able to hear improvements. Then you go through the process again until maybe 2 or 3 times, however long it takes. Mastering engineers do mastering. So a real mastering engineer that does nothing but mastering, it doesn't seem like that long of a process, but he'll fuss with it and fuss with it and fuss with it until he gets it coming out sounding great. Repeat the process and repeat the process until he comes out with a good master MP3. Now he has a master file for MP3s. Then you're going to put that in a different folder. Now you go through this process for whatever format you're making, and it's a work in progress. It's something you need to experiment with and really trust your ears and your analysis tools and gain experience doing that to come out with a good master file and then masters for whatever format that you want to distribute in, and it's pretty much that simple. So peace, hope, love. I'll see you in the next video when we kind of tied up in our mastering and touch on a few other issues.